here's the funny thing for me. When you're going through some dark times or some difficult roads that you're traveling, and you haven't have a quote or a theme that you just love at the time, and yet then when you go back to it and you look at it again, you can see sometimes it has a dark side or a flip side that can actually have a negative connotation when you're actually taking the positive out of it. So at the time it's uplifting, it's, it gives you wanting to really step forward again and stand up again. And yet if you look at that same quote again, you can sometimes see that there is a very detrimental side to it, or a side that you hadn't observed before. So let's go through these right now. The first one here is really about those times in life where the warrior inside of you has really taken a battering and is feeling quite pummeled by life in any number of different ways, whether you've been rejected in exams, whether you've been rejected in jobs, whether you've taken a bit of catastrophic injuries, or you've had some trauma. It's really about that person that has been feeling they've been beaten down, but they're going to stand back up, they're going to show resilience, and they're going to come back out. And this meme always really sits with me in that way, in terms of, don't you worry about me, I'm going to stand back up, I'm going to be okay, I'm stronger than all that. At times when you are feeling quite overwhelmed and unsure whether you can stand, this meme always reminds me that you can do it again. You can stand up that one more time. I've worked with horses and out in nature quite a lot of my life, and this can lead to where sometimes you do realize that you are absolutely a speck in an ocean, where you have no say in what's going to happen around you at times. And it's just a reminder that you can withstand that, you can stand back up. That whole attitude of, it's like the world be damned, I can stand back up. I can show that I am the storm too. It's always good when you're feeling like that battered warrior that you can get back up and you can show you do have strength still. The second one is actually the really funny one to me, because I've actually had quite a lot of injuries and accidents over the years, but funnily enough, rarely do I actually have any scars to showcase them. And so they've been quite intense injuries and quite intense accidents that I've had over the years. But this last one was actually the first one that left me with a really indelible scar, or quite a few scars actually. And in a funny way, it really justified sometimes when you're feeling sore and tired, that you did have this story to tell. And I can totally understand sometimes when people have, glandular fever, or they've had, mental illnesses where there's just nothing to show for it. And the person can be looking at them from the outside going, you look fine to me. And yet the inside, you are in immense pain, you're really struggling, you can have these really strong mental flashes of things actually going totally pear-shaped or collapsing. And yet on the outside, you look to the rest of the world like there's no problem whatsoever, that you should be just sailing through. So sometimes, in a funny way, having a scar to show is quite a relief in a way. Your integrity can't be questioned because you do have that scar to show for the world. It doesn't make it any less, doesn't make it any more, but you just have a marker in your life that tells of a story of a tragedy that once was, or a near miss that once was. Whereas I've actually come closer to death in that particular case. Not that that one with the scar actually wasn't close enough to death, but in terms of other incidents where I've been very close to death, this wasn't one of those. And yet I have the scar to prove my story, to prove to the world that I do have pain to hold. And sometimes you do need that little bit of proof. And yet for me now, the further away from that accident, it's not a scar of pain, it's a scar of triumph. And so that scar has changed shape, it's changed colour, and as I've moved further and further away from that last incident. But I just like the fact that this time I have that scar to prove to myself and to prove to others that I overcame. And sometimes you need those little markers in your life that says simply, I overcame. I always just love this one. This is my great one because it is totally about where the water's well and truly over your head, and yet you're giving a big thumbs up to the world. Because how do you explain sometimes what is happening in your life, and what is your normal now can seem overwhelming to someone else, and yet to you it is your normal, and you just got to keep trudging through. So it's on both levels, this one, where sometimes there are situations where you've just got to keep trudging through, and yeah, sure, it really sucks at the moment, but this is what it is, and to make it better, I've just got to keep going. Or those times where you're totally overwhelmed, but how do you explain it to anyone? It's those trusted friends that you'll talk to about, those trusted people that you'll talk about, but sometimes it's also now having the ability to say, you know what, not doing great, but it is what it is, and I'll try and get through this. And it's just letting sometimes you've got to acknowledge to other people that you are struggling a little bit, and just that simple acknowledgement doesn't mean they have to rescue you, doesn't mean they need to do anything about that. It's just letting them know that you are struggling a little bit at this stage. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned to come to terms with, instead of just absolutely slogging it out and no matter what, never say anything other than I'm okay, to say, I'm struggling a little bit, I don't need to be rescued, but this is really tough for me. And it's just sitting with that fact. And I think it's both ways, that if someone does tell you that, they don't necessarily need to be rescued. They're just letting you know that they are struggling. But it's still a funny meme. I love it. I remember reading Steve Waugh's book, The Australian Cricket Captain, at the time, and his was saying you should spend 10% of your day outside of your comfort zone in order to grow. And I've always taken that as a really great saying and thought. The trouble is, I think sometimes we all do, where as an athlete at the time, I would push myself to be better in what I was doing, but I was still comfortable in what I was doing. So even though I was pushing myself, I wasn't outside my comfort zone in terms of living my life. And I think that's possibly actually more what he was talking about. Living your life sometimes outside your comfort zone is more than just pushing your skills outside your comfort zone. And this, changing into leadership coaching, away from performance coaching, changing and doing this online platform in terms of launching myself into the virtual space that I'm starting to move in now, is way outside what I would have considered my comfort zone. But I wouldn't have considered even moving into this uncomfortable zone, because before I would have only been working on within my lifestyle comfort zone. And this was well and truly out of my lifestyle comfort zone. So this to me has a very different meaning than something like this did 20 years ago and even 5 years ago. But this is what I'm actually trying to live a lot more now, of living outside my lifestyle's comfort zone 10% and learning and growing and trying to do the best I can. Now, I've included this one because this reminds me of my mother always complains about me, that I was too much of a realist and that I didn't dream big enough sometimes, or I wasn't optimistic enough. And in a way, obviously, she was right in terms of I would always think of what I was capable of doing and working within that. But that, of course, doesn't let you dream big enough sometimes. And it's those big dreams that really keep you inspired and motivated to work on those skills of the realist, pushing yourself outside whatever those zones are that keep you in that framework of being a realist. And there's nothing wrong with being a realist in terms of you are the practical one and you are doing what you can within what you've got. And it makes you probably a little bit more content in some ways with what you do have. And so then you make sure you live within that. But it really sometimes does let you miss out on some opportunities of thinking big and going big and risking everything to go bigger. The pessimist, I've always found, I can't change what I can't change. And so sometimes we all wallow in a little bit of things that are against us. But as long as it's a wallow and we leap out and get going again, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of wallow. But I will admit sometimes being a realist isn't always the best thing, because as an optimist, you want to push those realistic boundaries of where you have now and really push hard and grow them. And sometimes I have been guilty of not always sitting in that growth zone. I always used to think overthinkers as a bad thing, or overthinking myself as a bad thing. And I'd watch it sometimes destroy clients or friends that were stuck in a rut where they were constantly overthinking and not being able to move out of it. But overthinking, I've also come in the last few years to understand, is a little bit like that fear and anxiety thing that we all carry around with us. Because if you've also learnt to deal with your overthinking and practice overthinking, so those people that have suffered anxiety, which I've had anxiety or fear in small ways all through my life, and I think that's pretty understandable, because unless you're brain dead, there hopefully is a little bit of fear and anxiety in our lives. But it also lets you problem solve that and get used to dealing with it and get used to moving through it. And I think overthinking is the same thing. Sometimes we do want to overthink something and looking at it from different angles, and then this is the important part of going, okay, I've thought through these things. Now I need to step into my action zone. And it's learning that switch from overthinking to an action point. We don't stay in that. And that's the same with fear or with anxiety. You can have fear because we're worried about something. We can have anxious because we're uncomfortable with something. And then we flick into, well, now I need to make the action of whatever decision I'm going to do and step forward into that. And to me, that realization that overthinking isn't actually the world's worst thing. It's actually a tool that can be useful to us so long as we use it and then switch through it. Now, this one in particular has always had a few different meanings for me, because it reminds me that you want to get out there and be living your life and not be sheltered in a calm bay. But it also has this flip side to me of sometimes you do need to sit in that little calm bay to just regroup, do some maintenance, take a breath, reorientate what you're going to do, and then sail out. And this one has that great double-edged meaning to me, where sometimes you've got to push yourself back out of the bay, and sometimes you need to be able to sit in the bay and do some repairs, reorientate, and then get going again. So I've always loved this little quote, but it's resonated in different ways throughout my life for what needs to be done. And I think, like a lot of these things, it's all about how it resonates with you at that time. So for me, it can be about pushing yourself out, but it also can be about letting yourself sit in that time and rebuild and then get going again. This is the great one for me, fear. Fear, we've all had obstacles with it. We've all run up against it. We've all been limited by sometimes with fear in either an intellectual way or a physical way. And you always think, if you don't have fear, then you should be able to just leap through in life, and it should be able to just be discarded and thrown out of the way. And yet dealing with fear, acknowledging fear, and moving through fear and understanding the mechanics of doing that is one of the greatest things you can learn in life. That you don't need to not have fear to still live a pretty amazing life, and that fear gives you so many things about how you can live your life better, and understanding how to do something better, and making sure you're acknowledging the fact of, am I doing it properly? Am I doing and having the tools and the resources that I need to do this task, rather than just pretend I don't have fear. So then in saying that, it's also acknowledging that, the fall down 7 times, stand back up 8. In so many ways, that's a great quote. It is absolutely, get back up, show you're going to tough it out. And that was what my life was all about, making sure no matter what, you got back up, you stood back up. And yet the flip side of that is, if you get knocked down 7 times, is this the right thing you should be doing? And it's actually then looking at the fact that sometimes if you get knocked down once or twice, then you should look around and think, right, can I do this much better than this? can I be doing this at all? Do I need to be doing this at all? So instead of just the total warrior culture of, stand back up, grind your teeth, and accept that you're going to get knocked down and that's okay, it's acknowledging that some things aren't for you. Some things are to be stepped around. You don't need to be in every argument. You don't need to win every battle. Take that time. Acknowledge where you are in life, and is this still where you want it to be? So sometimes you don't need to stand up again. Sometimes you can step around it. Sometimes you can think through something. Sometimes your better strategy is actually to go, nope, this isn't for me. I'm going to do this instead. And that opens up a whole new door and a whole new life. And why did I keep standing up? Why? Courage used to be a thing I could never see in myself, because I always thought it had to be the one that roared, that had to be the one that, went over the ramparts and went charging into the valley of death. And this is actually so true in terms of courage is a lot about just showing back up, is putting yourself out there and feeling uncomfortable and doing it anyway. I love this one, and it always speaks really truly to me because it lets me be comfortable with the fact that I don't have to roar for courage to be my big moment, that big decision, that big magic that you have to produce. It's just that little quiet, I'm going to try again. I'll do it again. I'll show up again. I'm scared, but I'll be there anyway. This is that little one that you sometimes come to it much later in life than you really should. That happiness is an inside job. You can feel joy with others, but you don't feel happiness unless you have happiness on your inside. And learning how to be kind to yourself is one of the greatest tools that you can ever grow and understand. And this is that perfect moment to understand that. Love people, love situations, but happiness comes from you on the inside. And let yourself be comfortable being you and being kind being you. The pelican eating the frog. Does it get any better than that? Never give up. That is self-explanatory. You're not going to get me today. Stuff you. If you're going to eat me, you're going to have to work damn hard for it. I absolutely love this meme. I've always loved it. And it's made me laugh, and it's made me cry, and it just gives you that real kick of stuff it. I'm digging in. I'm going to hold firm. This has always been one of my personal favorites because the behind the scenes of elite performance has a very ugly face at times. We always see the glamour of the World Championships or Olympics and we cheer on the winner. And yet it's those moments just behind the scenes that can be really soul destroying. Having worked in high performance, you get to see how many times there are people that are just off that moment, that have put their 4 years, 10 years, 20 years on the line. And for whatever reason, an injury or a mishap or just not quite getting the performance they want at the right moment, suddenly their dream goes in the opposite direction. So they'll still hold the scars, they'll still have all the pain, but they don't make it. And my sister always used to say one of the big things is necessity wears an ugly face. And high performance, or even when you're putting yourself out there in any form of elite way, whether it's academia or in a physical way, you are going to have very big highs, but you're also going to have equally lows because your soul is on the line. You're really putting everything you can into it. This comes with a price, and sometimes the price is really high and sometimes the scars are really visible. Sometimes the scars aren't visible at all, but it's whether you want to do that price. So This has always been a great meme for me in terms of, different times in your life you're prepared to pay that price, and in other times in your life you're not prepared to pay that price. But to think that if you're actually putting yourself on the line that things aren't going to be ugly or things aren't going to have really low moments is actually a false hope. So you're going to have those low moments, but if you're still invested, you don't care. You push on through and you keep going for it. And then you really want to do what you want to do. And that's a great dream to have. But those people that then say you're an overnight success and that you breeze through life, it's always a false assumption. And there's no way that anyone is an overnight success. Those stories are so rare that we're talking that 0.00% of the population that has absolute overnight success. For most of there's a very long grind period before that overnight success. And good on them for sticking it out, good on them for making sure they got through, but they all will have paid a price. And this meme exactly mimics that price, that, the glamour on one side, but the real grind on the other side. And there's rarely any shortcuts in life. And that's what this meme means to me. One of the things we probably don't talk enough about sometimes in Australia or sometimes around the world is suicide. And this meme really echoes that for me, in terms of we all have sometimes really horrendous hard days, but it's about being there the next day, showing back up. Hopefully we'll get through this period. Hopefully you'll make some improvements. Things will turn around. Try and find a circuit breaker to change what is that tough thing for you, changing what we can change, and then learning to accept what we can't change. And do I want to stay in that? There's nothing wrong with admitting that you're going through a really hard time, admitting that things are overwhelming you, but stay with it. Stick it out. Reach out. Find a friend. Reach out professionally. Talk through. It's amazing sometimes when you start voicing your concerns how much that takes the pressure away, how much that can relieve the burden. And sometimes even just talking out it allows your brain to process it a little bit better rather than staying in your own echo chamber. So this has a little bit of a dual meaning in terms of just getting yourself through those rough days, and also understanding that you're not alone with those rough days, that you can reach out, find someone, and talk it through. These next two are that little light sense of humour sometimes that you need in daily life, and it's to remind you that look on the bright side, and to do something really crazy like trying to atomic elbow a bear, which will obviously end very badly. But it's that ridiculous little bit of humour that you sometimes need to just give you a little lift and to laugh at yourself at the thought of doing anything so ridiculous. And the other thing of looking on the bright side, it's amazing sometimes where you can wallow in gloom and doom, and you just sometimes need to step back and go, hey, this really isn't that bad. Every moment of this isn't that bad. Yes, there's some horrendous moments, but every moment of it isn't bad. It's like that road trip that you do. If you're by yourself and you're having a really hard time, everything seems terrible. But if you're having a hard time and you're with a mate or a couple of friends, and suddenly nothing seems so bad. So, sharing a burden and having some laughs no matter how bad the situation is. And often they're the greatest memories that you actually have when you're looking back on it. So try and look on the bright side, and what the hell, let's atomic elbow a bear. So this next one from Thomas Jefferson is the prime example of something that for me has two very distinct different meanings. When you're having that hard time and you just want to really hang in there and not let go, because the only way forward is to keep going the way you're going. And it's a little bit like, so Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, make sure you keep going. This is spoken to me a lot during rehab, where you really are struggling to get through, but the only way to improve yourself, to make it better, is by keeping on going. So every last fibre has to hang in there, show back up, and do it all again. And yet equally, there are other situations in life where if you're getting really to the end of your tether, if you're not being appreciated, if you're not being rewarded in a way that's acknowledgement sometimes is all you need, in certain situations that, well, why am I there? So that's the time to actually, instead of tying the knot in, let the rope go. So you've already got the rope burn, you've already been holding on, you've already been hoping for the accolade or hoping for the acknowledgement of the work that you've done. And if that hasn't come, and why are you flogging yourself in this situation? So those times it's about actually letting go. Don't tie a knot in it, don't hang in there just for the sake of being there. It's actually letting go. Whereas other times in my life, it's very much of the only way to get through this, the only way to improve is tie a knot in, take a breath, reel yourself back up, find the strength for tomorrow to get back in there again. This one is really one of the family favorites because we often had, especially us kids, had terribly sharp, biting sarcasm, sense of humor. And even though it often wasn't about denigrating someone else, it was often self-effacing, it was still quite sharp, and it would cut through or cut into, obviously a fellow sibling would cop it fairly sincerely. And I always had to make sure, especially once I got a lot more into coaching and stuff, to make sure I toned down my sarcasm, because sarcasm is quite a funny tool if used correctly, and it's really a showcasing of self-denigration when you're actually trying to relate to someone else. And unfortunately, some people don't get sarcasm, and that's definitely fine. But I've had to make sure that I very much tone my sarcasm muscle down, and I don't reach to it anywhere near like I used to. Obviously, I try and use witty repartee, but that sometimes falls flat as well. Anyway, so sarcasm is always going to be the thing that probably, sends me to an early grave, and I'd prefer it was sarcasm than, an atomic elbow to a bear's head, quite frankly. I'm just going to leave this last one here without too much explanation, because I think it actually speaks for itself. And the older you get, the more you appreciate those little things in life that really make life worthwhile. And laughter is one of them, and love is the other one. Keeping fit, keeping exercise, making sure sharp mentally and physically as much as you possibly can, and just letting yourself enjoy life. And that's what it's all about. So I hope you guys engage with some of these memes. I hope they brought you a little thought and a little bit of reflection as to what you would do in some of these situations. As I say, some of them will have meaning to you right now, some of them have an opposite meaning, like some of them did for me. Anyway, I hope you liked this little video. They certainly helped me during periods of recovery or dark times, and I hope they do the same for you. So if you like them, share them, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for being here, and as always, remember to be kind to yourself and to kind to others. My name is Ben Netherfield, and I hope to catch you on the next one.